Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, the podcast where mothers share their powerful stories of healing and empowerment. I am your host, Amanda Quick, best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and advocate. In each episode, we dive deep into the stories of mothers who have overcome adversity, found their fierce feminine power, and embraced transformative parenting. Whether you're a mother driven to fight for your children or someone with a story burning inside you, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll explore themes of resilience, self-trust, and healing from our traumatic experiences, all spotlighting the profound journeys of awakened mothers. Join us for a space of naked authenticity, deep inspiration, and genuine connection. Embrace the divine feminine and discover your own warrior mama within. Welcome to Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Awakened Motherhood. I'm your host, Amanda Quick. And this episode number 3, is going to be the last episode in this little mini series where I talk about my big stories and what has kind of happened since. And this episode number 3 is going to kind of catch everybody up to a little bit more current day. And these are stories I haven't shared publicly before. But I also think it's important that beyond the big story that's in my book, there's so many other small stories, maybe not that small, but there's so many other things that have taught me so many different things. And I'm somebody who has always learned my lessons through direct experience. There are people out there. My younger sister is actually one of them. And she told me, she said, I watched you as a teenager and I decided that I was going to learn lessons watching you. I didn't have to do the thing. Well, I'm so glad that there are people out there that can learn something by watching me stumble and fall, but I'm not one of them. I'm somebody who has to do it. I have to do it. I have to live it. And then I can go, oh, there it is, Amanda. So if you're like me, you probably have had a lot of challenges in your life and you've probably had big things and made very many mistakes. And yet the beautiful thing about mistakes is they're only mistakes if we never learn. And then it's really this lesson and this gift the universe gave us. And so even after the big things happen, and I have these new tools and awarenesses and understandings, life doesn't stop happening. There's still day-to-day challenges. There's still parenting challenges. And there's the things that happen externally in my life that I have no choice but to respond to in a lot of cases. And this summer was packed full of it. In the beginning of the summer in March, we got grounded in a new house and it was like the last box to check. We'd house, job, kids, all the things. Everybody's good. Now we can, relax or something. I don't know what the so then was going to be, but it felt like we were finally grounded. We'd been seeking where our next home was going to be, where we were going to feel settled. And we finally got there. And, the schools the kids were in were seeming really good. We had plans for my oldest going to start high school, and he just started high school this fall, and all the things. And we only had about, a month or so of calm. But, we got moved in and all the things and got to play around decorating. And, I was waiting for my TEDx talk to be released because I had delivered that in February. I didn't know how long, but all the things were going according to plan. And just before the summer started, the first shoe dropped, so to speak. And my oldest son started having identity challenges, started having kind of an identity crisis. And he's on the spectrum. And although we never had formally diagnosed him. And so, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I discovered that he was being targeted by an online predator. And then he had been going down some rabbit holes despite the parental controls in place. And I really had to step in and have some hard conversations and have some really new, clear boundaries put in place about internet access and device usage. And, really kind of dig in to see where he was needing additional support and where things were coming from and really do a big mental health check-in. And I think teenage years, middle school years, that's some hard years for anybody. And when you add some neurodivergent challenges and a lot of other big change in your life, it's even more challenging. And so, my oldest was really kind of checking me a little bit here that, okay, I had checked all these boxes, but I had to really check in with my kids too. And even though they kind of seemed fine, there was more going on that they needed support with. And so, what is getting the right supports in place for him? It's, we're going down some diagnostic paths now for him. And Mama Bear even had to come out for a little bit and have some really hard boundaries. And, I'm reflecting on it and looking back, I definitely had a moment of, oh, this is, how do we navigate this new one? But at the same time, in the grand scheme of it, was only a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks of challenge, a couple of weeks of hard, and, coming back into his self and his body and kind of navigating what our summer was going to look like and, establishing new boundaries around device and internet use. And, we even lost his computer for a period of time because he wasn't following the agreed upon rules. And, when I asked him what the consequence should be, he told me to have it taken away. And I said, I think you're right. And, we've been learning to reestablish what trust is and communication and connection, which I think as your kids get older, we all have to do. We have to do on a regular basis. And we have to recognize that even if we think we know everything, because this is really where I connect with my oldest, is he knows he's smart. He knows he's usually smarter than a lot of other people. And so he also has this belief that he thinks he's right. And this one gets me. And I get caught up in this because I am right a lot of times. But when I'm not, man, it just smacks me. And, and I had to acknowledge to him that being that different and being, in a body that's physically changing because we're hitting puberty, he's just about taller than me, which I'm not okay with, is a lot. And so as we kind of got through that and we settled into more summer, the next thing that hits me is my mom's health has been declining. And I don't think I shared this in the other episodes, but about a year and a half ago now, she was diagnosed with cancer and went and underwent treatment. She had a bunch of chemotherapy treatments and almost had surgery and then had not had surgery. And it was actually doing better at the end of last year, at the end of 2023. And then in March, about the same time, she came to visit me right before we moved. And she was walking and she was seeming healthy and doing okay. And as soon as they got back home, her health declines, but this time it's going faster. And so she's starting to think about doing chemotherapy again. She's starting to think about, what this is going to look like. She's not happy about doing any of it. She's going down every alternative treatment option she can. And nothing is seeming to work. And so she's really kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to need to start chemo again. And I'm, going back down the traditional path while also continuing to look at other pieces because she saw how much it did help. But her health is declining faster and faster. And I remember calling her in June and saying, I'm not sure I can leave right now. There's all this stuff going on with my oldest, and I don't want to, I can't really leave him home in the summer. And, there's not like a summer camp for 14-year-olds anymore. And, and so I was kind of like, I would love to come see you. But in my mind, I'm thinking, she's going to have a little bit of a challenge, but she'll get through this. Well, I realized that was not happening. And in very early July, I think the phone call I had with her was July 2nd. Her health had been declining again. She'd ended up in the emergency room a couple of times. She had been getting regular belly fluid removals, and this was her primary symptom, as her belly would fill up with excess fluid. And that tested positive for cancer. And so she ended up in ER with fluid around her lungs. And so things were getting more serious. The fluid was spreading. We knew that. And she called me and we were talking, and, she's been weak. And, I'm not on video calls very often, so I can't really see her, but I can hear in her voice. She's not as present. And, I said to her, Mom, I think it's time to tell the truth. I think it's time to be honest with yourself, because she'd been so hyper positive. And we talked a lot about that. And we had about a 2-hour conversation in early July. The conversation, I brought up all of the times that I wasn't honest with myself, and I used the examples from, my book, my story, where I hadn't been willing to be honest with myself about the situation and the energy that I was portraying because of how much shame I held about it. And I said, I think it's the same thing. You can't change anything. You can't do anything here if we're not honest. If we're not like in our present reality, how do we change? How do we create something new from it if we're not present right now? And, it was a really good conversation. I believe she heard me. And she told me that she felt like that conversation was perhaps the most important conversation of her life because she really saw that she actually said, I haven't been honest about the C word, the cancer word. And I said, yeah, no, I know. She said, I'm really scared. I said, I know. And so she was kind of accepting and being in that present place and feeling what that meant. And she was going to take some time to go journal about it, go write about it, kind of feel what was actually the truth here. What was the truth that she wasn't telling herself? And, and this is a role that I have played with my mom and my family many times, but I feel like when we go through these things and we can see these perspectives, I could see there was more going on. My mom and I's relationship is very, very special. I realized when she first got diagnosed that how entangled our lives actually are, how the same my mom and I am, and this is the person as I grew up, I rejected and pushed away, and I didn't want anything to do with her, and I'm so not like her, and oh my God. And then I went to live her life. My mom has been married 3 times. Her first husband was early college to get out from under her father's, thumb. The second one was to my father. And she had 2 kids with my father. And then there was physical abuse, mental and emotional abuse as well. And when he and her divorced, he basically stepped out of our lives. He did not have, we didn't see him very often. There was no regular visits, nothing. And then her third husband, she met through her spiritual practice. She had a Sufi community and they would dance, the Dancers of Universal Peace. They would meet regularly, and she met him through that. And he was a landscaper and a Cancer and all these things. And my story, I got married first time at 17 to get out of my mom's house. That relationship didn't last very long. We were kids. Second relationship is to my now ex-husband, where I had 3 boys, not 2 girls. But when that relationship ended, after lots of mental and emotional abuse, he stepped out of our lives. Even my sister said, he did exactly what our father did. I said, yeah, that's a little weird. And then my third husband I met in a spiritual practice. He's also a Cancer, and he did a lot of landscaping work. And so, it's funny when I say it out loud because it's a little bit ridiculous that I went and made those exact same choices. And yet I did. And so my mom and I's entangled relationship is eerie. And not only that, when I was 36 when she got diagnosed with cancer. And when she was 36, that's when she had me. And so I had kind of completed her relationship lessons by the time I was born, in a sense. And that's when she was diagnosed with cancer. And it was almost like this moment of, you've done all these things and you passed these lessons on. What are you living for? What are you doing? And we talked about this, and it was this eerie, weird connection that we have always had. And she's the only person who can really see me. And I feel like in a lot of ways, I see her because of how much we are the same. And so we talked a lot about this and what this meant. And, neither one of us knew. But when I told her it was time to tell the truth, she could hear me. And the very next day, I called to check on her, and she couldn't answer the phone. She couldn't talk to me. And her husband answered, and he said, she's staring off into space. She's not cognizant at all. She basically left her body in a sense and was not present. he freaks out and calls 911 and goes to the hospital. And they discover she had a pulmonary embolism that broke off. And by the time she's in the hospital, she kind of starts to come to and has a little more cognition. She even walks out of the ER. But in that moment, I call my sister and I say, it's time to go. And, I really didn't think I was going to be able to leave. But because I had stepped in so strongly and put the boundaries up with my kids about all the internet use, that all the devices were taken away. And I realized I could actually go. And I was grateful to have, you know, somebody here who could watch them. And my youngest was going to be in summer camp. And so we could make it work. And so I took off time from work, and my sister and I jumped on a plane on the 4th of July to go see my mom and see what was up. And I had this knowing when I was flying there that I was going to say goodbye. And I just knew. And it's not an easy thing to know. And I hope I'm wrong, of course, but at the same time, I know. So I get there and we, wake up the next morning, and her body is starting to deteriorate working. Her limbs don't work. They're floppy, she calls them. And as the day progresses, the last time she walked was the first day we were there. And then by that afternoon, she couldn't walk again. She couldn't get out of bed on her own. She couldn't go to the bathroom on her own. And by the next day, she's lost completely both limb function. She can just kind of barely move an arm. And so we went from getting there, trying to talk about how do we get her function back, to initiating a hospice care program. And so we got hospice involved. We got hospital beds in place. We've got to figure out how to get her belly pumped while on a hospice. There's all this stuff going on. And, in my family, I am the one who deals with the things. I'm the one who makes the decisions. I'm the one who takes action. And this is true whether it's with my kids or with my mom. But, my mom's she doesn't have function anymore. She can talk. And we spend a lot of time talking. And she shares all the things that she could never say to me. She shares about her young years and all the things she held shame in. She has all these true confessions that she wants to tell me and to unburden her, leave nothing unsaid. And so we spend a lot of time together. And my sister is there, and my stepsister comes, and her husband is there. And I realize that it's the first time since I was 17 that all of us were in the house together. Because I left and I came back, but not all at the same time. And it was this kind of full circle moment of coming home, but in a very different way. And so she spends about a week on hospice, and then they tell us that she's starting to enter active dying phases. And in the hospice care protocol, it's very different than if you're caring for somebody who you're expecting to get better. It's very much about comfort measures. It's not about prolonging anything anymore. And so while she has oxygen and other things, once you've entered active dying, you don't eat anymore, you barely drink anymore, because your body is actively shutting down. And so we're aware that all these things are happening. And we are having lots and lots of conversations, unpacking things. Everybody has big feelings. And I have this really strong knowing that I'm here to midwife this journey for her. And, I'm checking in at home, and they're doing mostly okay. Gotta give props there, because this is also the first time that I've been away this long from my kids. But I know that I need to be here. I know I need to be somewhere else. And so I'm doing that. And I'm being present, and I'm, supporting my family. And it's been a couple weeks, and my younger sister, she has 2 young children, and she only brought the nursing baby. And she's having a hard time because it's been a couple weeks now, and she's ready to go home. And so she decides she's going to go home. She knows this is the last time she'll see our mom alive, but at this point, she's almost comatose. There's not much to do anymore. And so she leaves, and my stepsister leaves, and I'm starting to think about when I'm going to leave. I don't have a whole lot of time off left. I've taken a bunch of time off work. But I also don't want to leave her husband alone, because it takes at least 2 of us to change her. She's in diapers at this point. She's completely incontinent. And the hospice nurses come once a day, but it's not always enough. And so I'm grappling with it, and he tells me, you need to book your flight home. You need to go take care of your family too. And he does so in a way that she can hear him. She can hear him say that. And I say, okay. And I go book my flight. It's a Saturday and it's the full moon. And there's like this thing happening with flights about booking, and like United, I'm hit with a cyber attack and all these things. So it takes me some time, and it's not something I can do right away because they're like ridiculous amount of money. And, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wait till the right flight comes. The right flight will come. If it makes sense, I will do it. And, I also realized that she needed to hear that I was leaving, because some part of her was holding on while we were still there, but she also knew that she was ready to go. And it was the full moon, and we'd been pulling oracle cards and getting all of these messages about the full moon. It had been a week now of active dying, which is actually a really long time for a very frail woman to not have eaten or drinking anything, but she's still breathing. But that day, her breathing starts to change. And we're giving her some medication to try to calm her breathing down a little bit because it's really raspy, really hard. And, the nurse checks on us and says, it's probably not very long. And we know. And, we had picked out what she wanted to wear. She had decided that she wanted to be buried at sea, and had a friend who actually could do so without having to cremate first. And so we had all of that set up and planned. And, as in a lot of ways, it was this honoring time, honoring her life, honoring our relationships, spending intentional time together. And yeah, there's sadness, but none of us were sitting in this painful sadness place. We were all sitting in the joy. And my mom had changed her name actually to Joy. And so we were really trying to honor that as best we could. And so on the night of the full moon, her husband goes to sleep. He's been waking up every couple hours for weeks now. And it's the first night that I stay up with her because I have a sense, and her breathing changes and gets faster and faster, and then it starts slowing down, and I'm just watching her. And it's just a couple of hours before the peak of the moon, and I can tell that she's struggling. And I hold her hand and I just sit with her. And in that moment, she opens her eyes as wide as you possibly can, and she stares at me. And she's been basically comatose for days now. And she stares directly in my eyes, and she takes her last breath and leaves her body. And I cannot tell you the feeling that washed over me. I don't have English words to describe it. There was this honor in the transmission that she left and that she gave to me, the honor in being able to hold her in that process. Just complete reverence that the person who birthed me, I got to hold as she left. This womb to tomb experience, I called it. And so, we wash her body, dress her, all of the things. And I do eventually book a flight to go home because we know it's going to take some time to get her body transferred to where it needs to be. And then we're going to come back because now I've been gone 3 weeks. And losing my mom was not something I expected to happen this summer. I knew she was not doing well, but I don't think anybody expects to lose a loved one. And I definitely did not expect to be holding her hand through that process like I did. I've never been a death doula. I've never been around death. I had never had somebody close to me die like that. My grandparents, which I weren't really close to, but and pets, of course, but that's it. And this was my first experience that up close and right in that process. And it hit me. It hit me in this awe-filled way. And, there are moments where the sadness creeps in and the loss creeps in, but my mom's energy is so loud. And she's so present with me. And she stayed really, really close for a while. And sometimes it almost felt too close. And it's actually funny as I'm sharing that and talking to her, my body is getting warm and she's letting me know she's still here too. And I think that my connection to the other side in a lot of ways makes those kind of losses easier. because I can really feel it. And, I know a lot of people who lose people and they grieve for years. And I think everybody's process is different and you need to have the process you have. But I actually feel honored that I got to be a part of this version of it. And so I came home and processed a lot of things and prepared to go back and, when we were going to bury her at sea. And we discovered that the next full moon was going to be her birthday in August. And so what a perfect day to release her. And my job gave me more time off than I was expecting. And I was able to go and do that. And, we flew back out. This time I brought one child who needed to come with me, but not the whole crew. And we buried her at sea in Maui, and we released her body in this beautiful ceremony. We jumped into the water and swam with her. And it was really this feeling of releasing her back into her favorite place in the world, because the ocean is her home. And, reconnecting again with my family and, having actually the best time going through some of her things. My little sister, it's hilarious. She's exactly the same size and shape as my mom. And so she got to keep some of her clothing that fit. And, we all have some jewelry of hers and, giving lots of space for whatever her husband decides to do as next steps, but to be there and be present and supportive. And we had a beautiful ceremony on the beach for her Oahu friends and family. She was there 40 years. And, sending her off and hearing the stories and the people that she impacted, really touches you in a lot of ways, and being able to facilitate that. And, I gave her eulogy, of course, and invited other people to share words and experiences, and it was beautiful. And so that was August. So we've had June, July, and August, all these big things happening. So I come home again, reintegrating again, trying to figure out the kids are going to go back to school in September. We've got to get organized. I'm really hopeful about the new schools for both my oldest and my youngest, because smaller schools, more focused on their things. Everybody seems to be generally in a good place. Yes, they missed me, and there's, reintegrating back into that normal. But I'm, again, okay, what is life looking like now? And actually, just before we buried her in August, my TEDx talk was released, and it was released on 8/8, which some people believe is the Lionsgate portal. And it's funny because I delivered it on February 2nd. So I delivered it on 2/2. It was released on 8/8. If you're an angel number person, there's a lot of the significance to that. And it was also the first time where I was said, I can't call my mom. And that was hard because that's something I would have called and celebrated with her. But I had a lot of her friends call me, and a lot of people calling me and supporting me and sharing my talk and all of that. And that helped some, but it definitely hit me. I can't call her about this. And, she continues to speak because I talk about her, but it's different when you can't physically pick up the phone, right? That was the first time it hit me like that. And then, once the kids go back to school and all these things, I'm settling into, okay, now I brought all these new things out. So these are my new experiences, my lived experiences. How is this working into all these things I'm creating? And, I realized that the biggest thing I'd been missing in what I was bringing forward was motherhood. And it's funny when I say it because it's so obvious, but I didn't see it. I was so focused on spirituality, all these new, shiny, exciting things, that I wasn't bridging so much of other parts of who I am. I wasn't bridging the stories that I was sharing for my journey as a mom. Well, of course, but it took, more big things as a mom and as a daughter to realize all of that. And so I started to see, okay, I need to bring all this together. I need to talk about being a mom, being a mother in a different way. And I have all the stories about that. I mean, won't get into them, but I have so many different versions of this story. And so I started to see there's more to all of that. But just because I am a mom and I love being a mom doesn't mean that I want to have more kids. And this is something that I had been having these conversations about, because, part of the reason I got married the third time was because I had pregnant, and there was this debate about, did I want more children or not? And I wasn't sure, honestly, then. I had this idea in my mind that, well, if I find the right person and they really want one, then maybe. But I realized when I said that, I wasn't actually saying what I wanted. I was saying maybe I would do this for somebody else. But I also realized that that's not a reason to have a child for somebody else. And that if I was really going to put me first and to take care of me and my needs, I needed to do it because I wanted to do it if I did. But the truth was I didn't. I have this other thing that I want to birth into the world. I have this new version of myself that is being rebirthed right now. And I know the type of mom that I am, especially with a new baby. I cocoon and nothing else matters. None of my children ever took a bottle. I never hardly left them. And I think I'm capable of being a different type of mom. There's no judgment to people who do it differently, but there is just this innate pull inside of me to be deeply connected to my newborns. And so I realized that I don't actually want to have another child. I have had opportunities in a sense, but I don't want that. I want to do something else. I'm, coming up on 40 in a couple of years. I think I'm good. And so I started to think about what that meant from a, permanent decision-making standpoint. And I made an appointment with a doctor to talk about consultation to see what that would look like for me and what were the surgical options. And when I did that, my appointment was originally actually going to be in July. But obviously, I was holding my mom through her passing over instead. And so it was rescheduled for September. And so I went in after the kids went back to school, and my husband came home right as I was leaving and asked where I was going to go. And he knew we were having this conversation regularly. It wasn't a surprise, but I think he didn't realize what day it was. And said, "Oh, you're going to that appointment." Yep. And I could feel the moment that understanding hit him. I could feel the emotions coming forward. But I went and I learned the things. It's major surgery for a woman to tie her tubes or get them removed. And I wasn't thrilled about that. But I also wanted to be really clear about where I was and taking care of my body and putting my needs first, really. And had been clear ever since the miscarriage originally happened. I said, I think I'm really more in the I don't think so side. And then when we moved again, I said, now that I'm going to have health insurance, I really think I'm going to be done. And so this wasn't new, but it hadn't been that clear before. And so me taking the action of actually deciding triggered him to have to face what he actually wanted, because he had said, yeah, I kind of do, but I'm not sure either. So he was on the kind of yes side. I was on the kind of no side. And what had happened is we just got further and further away from the kind of to yes and no. And so he spent the next couple of days in basically a state of complete anxious panic. And I saw him doing this, and I realized this wasn't something I could actually help him. I usually take on the role of helping the people closest to me, but this is about me. Is not my place. And he was having panic attacks about the idea of never being able to have a child, and panic attacks about the idea of leaving, because if I'm not able to have a child, that means this isn't working. And so as he's processing all of that, I sent him to a friend of mine to help process these emotions, these big emotions, and he calms down. And he starts to kind of be back in his body and release some of the stress and the anxiety. And then the moment he calms down, I start to have a reaction. And this is the first time I'm having big emotions about anything like this. And I don't know if it's because of the loss of my mom. I don't know exactly what triggered it, but all of a sudden, all of these things came to the surface in me where when I needed something for me, he'd have this big response to it. And that I felt like I wasn't actually being supported in what I needed. and that I needed somebody who had my back in the way that I needed and the things that I wanted to do. And yes, there's partnership and compromise and all this, but it's not, it's both and. And I was just seeing all of these places, and it just kept like, it's almost like when you open the floodgates and it's just like, past, I don't want to see anymore. It just keeps coming. And it's seemingly small things that can easily be worked on in small pieces. But I was realizing how much on different paths we were. And I was seeing how his anxious attachment was basically making it so he could never actually make the decision to leave, even if that's what he wanted. And then in a sense, I needed to hold the truth that maybe this wasn't the right relationship. And that maybe I needed something different. And maybe he needed something different. And that's not a rightness or a wrongness. That's just, I started to not see the path forward anymore. And I sat in that, I felt it, all of it, the emotions of it. And I took the step to say it out loud. And I don't know if I would have been able to do this 4 years ago, 6 years ago. I definitely couldn't have said it 6 years ago, but telling the person that you love, that you're in a marriage with, that you don't think this is going to work, and be completely honest, even though you're still very in love with them, is not an easy thing to do. And saying it and allowing them to have their feelings and then holding that, because he wanted to just wash through it and not do anything about it. And he wanted to say, yeah, well, but we should work on it. We should go to counseling, or we should do this. And I said, we could do those things. That's true. But do you truly believe in your heart this is going to work? Because this is a big unsolvable thing. I do not want another child, and you, I think, really do. And I have 3, and these are my focus, these children, as well as the baby that I want to bring out into the world in my stories and the things that I desire to do. And it took a few days. And he finally said, I didn't want to say it because if I said it, I couldn't take it back. But I've been getting messages, knowings the whole time, this whole week, that the more expansive path, the better path for both of us was to leave. The moment he said it, it was just this like, thank you. Thank you for being honest with me. Thank you for being honest with me and finally being honest with yourself. He was trying to fight to that truth. He was trying to not be honest with himself. He was trying to do the same thing my mom was doing and live in this other world where we just can be positive and everything will be fine. The same thing that I used to do regularly. We all lie to ourselves. But I don't know if it's because I held that truth or we've both done so much work and growth together, but we were both able to come to this place of honesty. And this was the next full moon in September by the time we got to this point. So full moons have had a fun little dance with me. And so that full moon, we made the decision. And within less than a week, his car was packed up, he'd quit his job, and he moved out. It's the fastest thing ever. It was just this momentum of pack up and go. It was just, he's somebody who he's always been a minimalist. He doesn't have a ton of things. And he could give his 2 weeks notice, but they didn't need him to. They were winding down in a lot of ways. And he just knew it was time to go. And so he did. He packed up and he left, and we were both worried about telling the boys. This is another loss for them in a lot of ways. And yet, we were both so grounded about it. My youngest had a 5-minute moment and then was fine. And, they called a couple times and had conversations. He's not falling off the face of the planet in the same way, but he's also not their biological father. And I think I had hoped that they had a more fatherly relationship than actually transpired. And I got to get reminded again about how deeply connected my kids are to me when it comes to emotional safety and groundedness and security. And the more I'm grounded, the more grounded they stayed. And I really got to be shown that by this. And then a week later, I filed the paperwork. And in Oregon, there's no waiting period. And so I got to go through the worst, hardest divorce, at least in my experience, with the kid's father. And then less than 24 hours later, after filing, everything was signed and it was over. Just boom. Fastest divorce ever. Easiest. In a lot of ways, healing. Because I got to see this doesn't have to be hard. We don't have to break up and hate each other. We don't have to fight over everything. There was nothing to fight over. It was to send somebody off with love and to hope that they get to go create their beautiful lives, knowing that they're going to actually receive more from it if you're not together. And so that's been now a month because we just passed the October full moon. And this whole year, everything has been ripped out from under me in a totally different way. My house is still here. My job is still here. My security things are still present. My kids are still grounded. But the two people who are closest to me, my husband and my mom, are gone. And it's this like recentering, full circle moment. And I've had this same full circle moment a couple of times. And a full circle moment where it's just me and my boys again. I remember right after I got full custody of my kids in 2020, I was reading stories to them. And, when they're little, I would read bedtime stories every night. And I remember sitting and reading to them, just having this moment of, which is just like when they were babies. Like it's me and them again. And I had the same feeling, although I wasn't reading to them because they're much older now, but I had the same moment after my husband moved out again. And this full circle moment where it's just me and them again. And the feeling is as it should be. And, I'll tell you at the very moment, I'm not interested in ever getting married again. I'm done. And I have this realization that my kids are going to continue to have their challenges, but the more present I am with them, the easier they'll be. Big challenge, small challenge. I got this. My mom, her energy will remain present and remain here to support, but that I am who they need, and that's okay. That's good. And so here we are. It's the third episode of Awakened Motherhood. Me, now, again, a single mom to my 3 kids, gone through hell and back again and again. And this final release, in a lot of ways, this untanglement, I also got released from my mom's pattern and stories because I made a different choice than she did. And I no longer have this model of hers to follow. My life is my own. And I really get to start with a blank piece of paper now. And I think a lot of us don't realize how much we don't start with a blank piece of paper. We have the stories and the beliefs and the things that we've learned in childhood and the things we've been modeled and crazy, weird, energetic entanglements that we have. But I feel like I actually get to start my life now, and it's freedom in a different way. I'm really excited to see what comes. I'm really excited to share these interviews with these amazing people. And I'm really excited to step forward in this new world that I feel we're all here to create together. To learn what support is in this new world, to learn what abundance is, to learn what all these different components are, and to do so with a different kind of ease, a different kind of safety in my body, a different kind of connection to my kids. That's what I'm looking forward to. All right, everybody. The next episode will be a wonderful interview, and I will start weaving in other one-on-one episodes. So you will continue to hear stories from me, not to worry there. But if you desire to get in touch, or you want to work on your stories and processing the things that have happened to you, please do reach out. Amanda at amandaquickhealing.com. I would love to talk to you or find me on social media. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Lots of love, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on Awakened Motherhood. I hope today's episode inspired you and offered support for your journey. Remember, your story has the power to ignite change, and your resilience is a testament to your strength as a mother. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Share it with other mothers who might benefit from our stories of empowerment and healing. I invite you to connect with me on social media platforms at Amanda Quick Healing, or visit my website, amandaquickhealing.com, for more information on other ways to work with me. Until next time, keep embracing your divine self and discovering your warrior mama within. Thank you for being part of Awakened Motherhood, where your story is the spark for change.